they were the one who actually committed some atrocities.
No, I disagree.
And
you cannot say that.
And very
what atrocities? What atrocities do you have that you're going to commit? That was a big falsity. It's a complete fantasy.
It's not a fantasy. It's a fact which everybody knows.
And with the whole war,
everybody knows.
Joseph, with all the atrocities that the Muslim nations committed against the Jews, including the massacre in 29 of Hebron, when there wasn't even Israel, all you can come up with is this fantasy of the Yasin. I mean, it's amazing. That's the only fantasy you can come up with. But it remains that the Haganah agreed with the Irgun to divide the weapons, and reneged on that decision.
The government, it was already a national Israeli army, asked that the weapon be given to the national army.
They had no right to it.
The Irgun refused, and the only solution to avoid a civil war between Jews was to sink the ship with
that is the biggest propaganda nonsense. Ben Gurion wanted power. He held it for 30 years, and he didn't want Menachem Begin to have power, and so that's why they fired on the ship. And it was Begin who got the weapons. He had no right to them.
Let's go back.
My father was in the Haganah, by the way.
Let's go back to Nakba. The point I want to make is that, again, the Israeli government was trying to get the local Arab population to stay, but you had war, and
the local population wanted to kill the Jews, period.
And the consequence of the war was that about 700,000 local Arab Palestinians left
of their own accord,
and they became refugees
of their own desire.
And this is what is called Nakba, which is the fact that these people became refugees and left their home. The point I want to make is that the reason why everything took place in the first place is because the neighboring Arab countries refused to accept the decision of the United Nations. If the neighboring Arab countries had accepted the United Nations decision, there would have been no war, and there would have been no refugee, and there would have been much smaller Israel than what it became, because the border of the UN were smaller than what it became later, and you would have had Palestinian in Arab country living next door in peace with Israel. That was in 1947. It happened again later, because in 1949, after you had the war, after you had the ceasefire, the UN tried again to go back not to the old border, but at least to have two independent countries. And the Arab countries refused again in 1949. They still refused to accept the UN resolution, and they refused to have independent Arab Palestinian state being created.
And that's after their defeat.
Jordan occupied most of it, and Egypt occupied the Gaza area.
And the Sinai.
So the Sinai was not part of Israel.
Not half of the Sinai was never Egypt.
But so it is Jordan and Egypt that prevented the creation of an independent Arab Palestinian state in 1949. And the irony is that between 1949 and 1967, you had what, according to the UN, was supposed to be an independent Arab Palestine, and it was occupied not by Israel, but by two other Arab countries. And to my knowledge, there never was any protest by any country or by the UN about the fact that this Arab Palestinian country was occupied by somebody else. It's only after Jordan declared war in 1967 to Israel, and they lost their war, and as a consequence of the war, Israel ended up occupying the territory, which they said they are not interested in. They were ready the next day after the war to give back the territory against a peace agreement, which again the Arab country refused. But it's only after Israel occupied this territory that all of a sudden everybody started complaining about occupation. But from 1948 to 67, when it was occupied by Jordan and Egypt, nobody ever complained about occupation. So this is
because it wasn't
very strong hypocrisy on the part of the entire world.
Yes, it certainly is, and especially on the part of the Arab Muslims. Now, meanwhile, what was the role of the Christians in all this? There was a Christian population, and nobody ever talks about 47, 48, there was a Christian population. Where did they figure in any of the fighting and any of the negotiations?
They were part of the Arab Palestinians. I mean, the Arab Palestinians were mostly Muslim, but there was a small minority that were Christian. To my knowledge, they didn't have any special or different role than their Muslim compatriots. I mean, I have no specific knowledge of things happening differently because we were Christian Palestinian as opposed to Muslim Palestinian at that period.
When was the term Nakba first used?
I don't know when it was first used. Nakba is an Arabic word which means catastrophe. I don't know when it became.
It wasn't. I never heard it till '67. I heard after '67.
Political. Well, one reason. I don't know why. I mean, I really don't know at what date it started becoming a strong political issue. That I couldn't answer.
In terms of the numbers of the migrations, I find, and many find, the current UN figures to be highly exaggerated as to Palestinian refugees. And the numbers are exaggerated because they get all kinds of donations and gifts and a stipend per refugee. Am I correct? That each refugee listed is entitled to a certain amount of relief from the UN.
Okay, the first thing is to be more precise about the word refugee, because there again there are legally issues. If one goes to the UN website itself, that takes care of the refugees from Palestine. First thing, there was a UN agency created in 1949 to take care of the refugees from Palestine. Very important. And that meant all the refugees from Palestine, which included the Jewish refugees, because there were also a number of Jews who used to live in what became Jordan, Palestine, and they became refugees in Israel. So when UNRWA was created, it took care of both the Arab Palestinians who were refugees in Israel, outside of Israel, and the Jews who became refugees in Israel, having left their houses in Hebron or in East Jerusalem. In 1952, the Israeli government told UNRWA, "Thank you very much, but we are now strong enough to take care of our own refugees. We don't need your help." Now, I'm going back. If one goes to the website of UNRWA, it says very clearly that refugees from Palestine are people, and I'm going to read the exact wording to be sure. I'm quoting, Palestine refugees are defined as persons whose normal place of residence was Palestine during the period 1 June 1946 to 15 May 1948, and who lost both home and means of livelihood as a result of the 1948 conflict. Now, UNRWA services are available to all these people, and the descendants of male refugees are eligible for registration. So it's very clear. The legal definition of refugees are only those people who left. The children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they are eligible to receive help, but according to the official definition, they are not legally refugees. They are descendants of refugees.
And
now, this has been forgotten.
Why the male? Why the male?
That's what was written. At that time, female didn't count, obviously. I'm just reading. It's part of what is written there. I didn't make it. But the point is that nowadays, the word refugees is used for all of them. But from a legal point of view within the UN context, it's very clear that the legal refugees were only those who actually left their house, and then the UN resolutions, which was passed at the same time about the return of the refugees, only applies to, again, these people who left, not their children or grandchildren. If you look at the context, it's very, very clear that this is the legal context.
And that would reduce the current number dramatically.
The current number of people who are refugees, according to the official UN definition, will be only about between 30 and 40,000.
And we have what? How many million?
There are about 5 million people who are registered with UNRWA to receive the services of UNRWA.
Yeah, and that's who they want to get back into Israel. Look what's happened to Europe with the refugees, so-called, from the Syrian revolution, and they want 5 million who are not even refugees under the definitions to come back and destroy the Jewish state. So what do you think are the chances of that?
Of what?
Of ever having any kind of agreement that would have 5 million so-called refugees who are Arab Muslim coming into Israel?
That will not come with an agreement, obviously. I mean, there is no chance of having an agreement where Israel will agree that, because that will be self-destruction.
Exactly. So that is, however, a cardinal principle of any negotiations put forth by both the PA and Hamas. So why are they wasting everybody's time saying there's going to be negotiations when they cannot possibly get past the issues of that and Jerusalem? Why don't they just stop now and accept the status quo that existed before Clinton muddied up the waters?
I don't agree at all. It's the reverse. There could, and there was very close to be an agreement at the time of Clinton, and thanks to him, except it didn't work, where the refugee issues was implicitly solved, in the sense that the agreement was not requesting the return of the 5 million to Israel, but they will become citizen of wherever.
But that was rejected. The Arabs rejected. Anyway, we're out of time. I want to thank you. It's not often to get an expert with your experience and knowledge. From the conversation, Shannon Taylor, Joseph Grunberg, thanking you for your attention, and I hope to see you again soon. And thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we still on?
I don't know.
Oh yes, we have another 5 minutes.
No.
Until 7:30, yes.
No, then it's at 28.
It's not 28 either.
So then I want to thank you again for coming on the show. And you see, they keep rushing me here.